following interview with Rhonda Attenborough took place at a home in Hamilton, New South Wales on the 4th of June 2019.
Okay, I'm a Novocastrian. I was born at the Mater Hospital, as was my daughter, and as goes down the generations. I grew up in Hamilton over near the school. At that point there was a girls' high school over there, and I attended that up until the age of 14 and 10 months, which was not uncommon at that time. There were many jobs available in Newcastle. It was a really thriving place. My first couple of jobs were with real estate. I also worked at Kmart, the new Kmart, before they opened and when they opened. That was very exciting. But I did spend a lot of time working at the store. And I started working there when I was 15. And I wasn't there for a huge amount of time, but it had a big impression on my life. I left in 1972 when I was 17 because I was getting married.
Okay.
At that time, all women, or all young women who decided to marry were expected to leave their job, which I know sounds weird to people these days, but it was just part of the course. I didn't question it at all. We were going to move up to Muswellbrook, and we did. But if I'd stayed in town, I would have just assumed that, a woman has a baby, looks after the house. So it was still that era.
It was the done thing, wasn't it, back then?
It was the done thing, very much so.
So thinking back to when you started with the store, you were there between 15 and 17, run me through what you actually did at the store, what your first role was, any other roles you had.
Okay, I was initially employed to work in the fabric department, which was an interesting time because that was 1970, and it hadn't been long since we had changed from pounds, shillings and pence, but also to metric from imperial. So it was a really challenging job. There were no calculators. We had to do everything in our head or on a piece of paper. In fact, a piece of paper was frowned on. You had to do it in your head. So many of our clients being elderly, we were having to calculate from inches and feet to metres and centimetres, and then also the money for them as well, so they could fully understand. Well, I don't think they ever fully understood. But, we managed to go through. So I learnt my maths working for Mr Hughes in the fabric department, which was a really enjoyable time. I loved working for him. It was a busy place. When the big sales came through, we just heads down and we just worked and worked and worked. As I got a little bit older, I then moved over to the ladies' fashions, which was just across the way. I thought I'd hit the big time. It's very fancy. We had a whole wall cabinet full of furs. So, it wasn't unusual for us to be taking the mink out and draping it on someone's shoulders. And it was a very high-class, real department store at that time.
So the service and
the service and, Miss Attenborough and Mrs Mack and Mr Hughes, who were never used for first names. You certainly wouldn't be seen sucking on a bottle of water at the counter.
You reminded me of that. What's that show that...
Are You Being Served?
Yes.
It's very much like that, particularly with some of the older staff. When I look back on it now, they probably weren't that much older, but to a 15, 16-year-old, they seemed to be very, very old.
Yeah, yes, of course.
Mrs Mack and Mrs P that would go into the ladies' room and have their Vincent's powders every half an hour, which is not uncommon at that time, I think. Not so much bed linen, because at that time linen was very good quality, and you wouldn't throw it away the way we do now. It would be patched, it would be reused or cut down for children's beds. Clothing, definitely, everything from really basic underwear right through to ball gowns.
Mm-hmm.
I can also remember that we had quite a busy trade with the jockeys. The owners of the jockeys would come in and buy what are called silks, but it was actually quite a simple fabric that they would have made up into silks, which of course they would be horrified at now. Curtains, definitely. That was a big part of our department. But mostly dresses.
Okay.
Dresses, pants, especially in the 70s, pantsuits were very fashionable. And selling patterns was a big part of our job too. We'd have hundreds and hundreds of patterns on the premises and helping people go through those, and also helping people work out how much fabric they needed for whatever.
Was it half that made their own clothes as opposed to bought them, or was it still more people that made clothes at that era?
Most people either made clothes or had them made. My mother was a seamstress and she would make clothes for lots of different people, but those same people would then buy a good dress if they were going to have something for a special occasion. So a bit of half and half.
Okay.
But when I was a young person, I don't think I had a dress or any clothes that were new from a shop until I got married.
Your own clothes, isn't
I
it?
made a dress recently. It's a big challenge. And mum, stuff, and I thought, I can't be too hard.
What are your childhood experiences and memories of the store?
We would not have, because we were from a very poor family. So there was no spare money for buying things at a department store. I can remember as a very young child, we lived at Beresfield for a while, and we would get the train in to have a look at the Christmas lights. And, that was a really big deal. And we would walk from one end of Hunter Street to the other at night just for the entertainment of it. There were no other people around, and Mum rarely took us into town because there just wasn't any extra money for buying things. So when I started work, to have a disposable income was a real big thrill, even though most of us paid half our wage to our parents as board, which was quite common. We still managed to have all of the little bits and pieces that we wanted. It was a big deal to have a job.
And did you remain as a customer of the store after you left when you got married in them?
I did, yes. Not so much for the groceries. I did like the food hall area. My sister worked there for a while, and I certainly did keep buying fabrics and things because I had a child a year later, and I would make clothes. At one point, I also booked a trip on the P&O Himalaya to go on a week's cruise at the travel agency there.
Yes, because there was a travel agency in the store, wasn't there?
Yeah, and you could pay it off. So,
can you describe some of the interior and the furnishings of the store to us? What did a fabric department look like in the 1970s in the store?
There's a lot of people that are really sad to see the store go, and the memories are wonderful. But truly, in the 70s, the store was already an old building. It was a big building, and it took a lot of maintenance. I spent a lot of time in the store building afterwards when it was the Pink Elephant Markets. I actually ran a gym in the old Namatjira room. Each of the departments had been dressed, you would think, in the 40s and 50s, and pretty much they hadn't changed much from then, and I don't think they ever did. They were adequate for our needs, very basic cash tills and things like that. It was an old building. It was very much a reminder of the old wooden counters, and the desks for cutting on were well and truly scarred. And staffing areas were quite old-fashioned. You would go down and you'd sit and smoke your cool cigarettes while you had your ice bun on your break. And I can remember one of the supervisors coming through one day and saying, "Has anyone got a Valium?" And pretty much every girl in the room pulled a packet out of a bag. So in those days, that's what we did. We smoked cool cigarettes, took our Valium and our pill, because it was the beginning of the pill era. And, so it was funny, and it is a lot like the old, are you being served environment.
So do you remember specifically any of the staff that you worked with, any of your managers or any fellow co-workers?
Not a lot, and that's unfortunate because I didn't stay in touch with people. But I do remember Mr. Hughes that I worked for, and my sister worked in that department in fabrics after I was there. And I remember that he had mouth cancer, which was something that you didn't see a lot of people with cancer coming into a workplace. And he'd had laser treatment, which was only very new, and it had fallen and it had burnt all of his mouth. So he had a really bad scarring. But he worked with us really well. He was always very supportive of me. Other personalities, Philip Carnell, of course, he was always there. The manager of that department was my next door neighbour, Jack Gale. He was the manager of the menswear department, and he was there for a very long time. And I think that's where my brother got a job with him, because we knew each other. It was a small town and everybody knew each other.
So your brother worked in the menswear department as well?
Not for very long, but I was talking to him the other day and he was reminding me of a lot of the pricing schedules, and he told me the code for the pricing, which I'd forgotten about completely. Other people that I remember would be some of the girls that I modelled with, some that you've been in touch with. When they had their big fashion parades every 6 months, they do a seasonal parade. And as a very young girl, I was thrilled to be asked to be part of it. And I have two very close, long-time friends from that time, and one of them you've spoken to already, Susan, and another which is Lindy Cameron. And her family has a lot of background in it as well. But we were young girls in early 70s, thought we were hot. The props department always went over the top. I have some photos there. You can have a look at the stages and things like that. They were really full on, like they were an important part of the fashion season. There were only a couple of department stores in Newcastle, but the store had quite a few branches, and we would also go out to Cardiff or Charlestown. We would go in for a fitting. There was no choosing what you wanted to wear. You were told what to wear and what to do. Our hair was done by the hairdressing department, which was a very popular hairdressers up on the same floor as the fabric and fashion. Our makeup was also done by them, and it was rehearsal time. It was very well planned. We went out to Maitland and had photos done previously with a big old antique car, which was splattered all over the pages of the newspaper, and it really promoted a lot of business. I think we would do 1 or 2 a day for a full week, and as I said, we would move then around to the other places. Yeah.
Okay. And how many outfits would you model at each parade?
I think there would probably have been about 8 to 10 each. which is pretty typical. They were long parades. They would have seats set up for everyone, and all of the ladies would come dressed in their finest. It was a moment to be seen as well. And, it was a good time.
And so did they use that opportunity to match the dresses with the shoes and the accessories and all those other products that they sold at the store? Was everything you were wearing?
Yes, absolutely, and it was all promoted by the compere, and ladies would come and have a look at them afterwards, and you could stand there and model if you were in the one that they were interested in. It was very old-fashioned, but very exciting for us because the fashions were actually very modern. We had mini skirts and middies and maxis and boots and the most modern makeup. So it wasn't like it was an old fuddy-duddy type of parade. They were actually very fashionable. For instance, if you went out to dinner with a group of friends, if it was all women, you couldn't go into a restaurant. You had to have a man as an escort with you. I can remember saving for months to go to dinner with a girlfriend of mine, and we made a booking and we went there, and it was really fancy. They wouldn't even let us in.
Wow, I
Because we
didn't
were
know that.
unescorted. So it's a very different era, and within 1 or 2 years that changed completely. This late 60s, early 70s was a real time of change. And then you had the era of Gough Whitlam. The government changed a lot of things, marriage laws. At the time I got married, if you wanted to divorce, you had to wait 7 years.
Wow.
And you had to have proof, photographic proof usually, that one of the people had caused a problem.
Yeah.
Whereas within 2 years of that, you only needed to be separated for a year.
No fault divorce, there was no, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a big change in social attitudes.
Yeah.
And it was interesting working amongst that, because at work I would wear like micro minis, platform shoes, and Mrs. Mac next to me didn't have either one. I shouldn't say that. She was probably very fashionably dressed, but I didn't think she was him.
So if you could pick one outfit, if you think back to your store modelling parades, is there one outfit that stands out for you in your mind that you can describe for us?
Oh, absolutely. It would have to be the dark red velvet maxi skirt that buttoned right up the front, the black lace boots, and the white blouse with the fluffy front,
Peasant kind of,
like a pirate shirt type of thing, or peasant shirt. Yeah. I just thought it was hot stuff.
and would that have been, so you would have done fashion parades like spring, autumn, winter, summer, were they
It was spring and autumn, which sort of covered the winter.
so that probably would have been an autumn one then, would it?
Yes, it
Okay.
was. Yeah. And of course, sort of, I was a young girl and I thought I wanted to be a model, and it was, for me, it was a great step forward.
So did modelling at the store encourage you to want to do more modelling, or was it the taste and that was enough for you?
I'd already started doing some modelling. I'd already started doing some photographic work as well. But catwalk was what I wanted to do, and I did eventually do quite a lot of it. But I would say that opportunity at the store definitely launched, well, not a very prosperous career, but certainly an interesting one and a joyful one. Well, I mentioned to you that the Labor Party came in 1971, and I was a regular model for the Newcastle Herald. David White was the photographer, and he had been taking pretty much, which I don't know if most people will understand what a page 3 girl is. I had quite big boobs, I still do, but I had that Dolly Bird look at that time, and I would regularly be in the newspaper when they wanted to do a promotion for the Gough Whitlam election, they chose me to do the It's Time logo, which was quite funny because I was only 17. I wasn't old enough to vote anyway. It was an interesting time. Thanks to Dad. Dad always cropped all the newspaper cuttings and kept them. But that was a special memory because that was a big part of history in Newcastle. Newcastle, yes, but Australia especially. I went along to Anne Fenley's School of Deportment, which most young ladies did. So cross my feet, but I can't. And I then started to do a bit of local work, and I enjoyed it very much. It was something that I could do that was interesting for me. I was a single mother by that time, and I started to make some good friends out of it. Stayed with friends with people like Lindy, who, in fact, we ended up working at TAFE in Sydney together.
Okay.
And later on, I just got involved with more catwalk type modelling. It was more this sort of thing. I was considered quite tall as a young woman, not these days, because they're so tall. In fact, I still, on occasion, will do modelling for friends. One of my lovely friends, Jean Bass, I was one of her lead models, and we still stay in touch quite a bit. So a couple of years ago I did a parade in her shop, which was really nice, except I couldn't get up on the platform. My legs wouldn't work. I looked great standing on the floor.
So did you do most of your modelling local in Newcastle on the Hunter? Did you ever extend to Sydney or anywhere else? Or?
I did a little bit for Sydney, mostly for David Jones.
Okay.
We would do quite a bit of television work for David Jones. In the 80s, there were Newcastle Television had some really good lifestyle programs that were local, and they promoted a lot of product that was local.
Heading back to the store now, you mentioned earlier on the Namatjira room. That's one I haven't heard of before. So could you just run me through what the Namatjira room was?
Namatjira, the Aboriginal painter. I may have this completely wrong in my head, but I was under the impression that one of the catering rooms was the Namatjira room. So I may be completely wrong about that. And from what I can remember, there was a Namatjira style mural on one of the walls. So as I said, I do remember going and having our breaks. We would have our lunch break and our morning tea and afternoon tea, and we would go and sit and have our little buns and smoke cigarettes in the food hall. So,
which would be an absolute no-no in today's...
I'm horrified to think that we did those things.
It's funny how times have changed, isn't it, from that 70s era to...
restaurants for a very long time. So for me to see that change is, I'm horrified to think of the years and years that I worked in restaurants with people smoking all the time.
What was your funniest or your saddest experience?
Probably more interesting than anything.
That'll do.
Newcastle's always had a very open and quite, I can say the word, out there gay environment. And I can remember working with a young boy called John. I have no idea what his last name was or what department he worked in. But I can remember that the two of us would go shopping on our lunch break, and we would go up to the ladies' department where I worked, and I would have picked out a whole range of clothes for him to try on. But I would try them on because I was his size, so that he could then just choose what he wanted. It was an interesting thing. People knew what was going on, but no one ever did anything or said anything about it. But yeah, it was an interesting. I can remember it vividly because now, when I look back on those days, it was quite well accepted in Newcastle. I'd have to say.
It must have been nice for John to know that he had someone. You offered him a form of support.
15. So yeah, it was, and I remember him fondly. I can't tell you what he looked like. All I know is we were the same size, and yeah, he was very grateful.
Yes. So, is there anything about the store that made an impression on you over the years, or anything that that sticks with you, your time there, or anything you saw there? Or
as I said before, I only worked there for a fairly short time compared to other people, but it did have a big impact on my life, in that I learnt a lot of things when I was there, and I was at a very impressionable age. I learnt, as I said, but the practical things like maths and working with money, which I found that I was very good at, and was given a lot of responsibility very early. But also the social environment, how to treat older people, how to work with older people, what was appropriate in society, what was all right outside, what was okay in the staff room, but how to behave was a big part of it. And I still feel like I'm very old-fashioned in some of those things, but I know that a lot of it came from there.
Yeah. So the next question is a question that looks at shopping today compared to shopping then. Now, given that you mentioned you recently made a dress and that you worked in the fabric department, can you describe for me the difference between your experience having purchased fabric recently to make a dress as opposed to selling it to people in the 1970s? What were the differences between those experiences?
It was a lot more hands-on. You were actually a part of the process. You were helping people, especially if someone was new to it or a little bit nervous about it. But women were very, happy to ask your opinion. Do you think this fabric would suit this style? Can you give me a hand? It was a lot more hands-on. You were definitely involved in the whole process, whereas nowadays, if you want any advice buying fabric or patterns, it's just it's over there.
It's different. Those people themselves probably aren't necessarily experts in matching patterns with fabrics and naps and.
That's exactly right. Does this stretch? Can I make it on the bias? Or so yes, buying the fabric for the dress that I just made recently, if I didn't know what I was doing, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't be able to get the assistance the way you would have been able to in the 1970s.
Right.
What do you feel that the store meant to the community throughout its ages and throughout the time that you were there, and with the closure of the store and that later on?
I know that each individual branch was very important to the local community, and people were fiercely loyal to their own branch and would always try and shop local. If they came to the city store, it was usually an outing, and then they would make a day of it, and they would have lunch in the cafeteria, and they would go through every department. There's no such thing as just going straight to crockery. It was, you would go through the whole thing. It was a whole day out. And it meant that even though there was a lot of shopping in the city, it meant that people could also shop locally as well. And the quality was good. It was very good. Even when my daughter was a little girl, we still had the bread cart coming to the house. She's 45 now. but it was very personalised, and they did take any complaints seriously. It's a very different story now. A lot of the multinational companies, as you mentioned earlier, clothes are pretty much disposable these days. So just talking about clothes, and actually not just clothes, but things like vacuum cleaners, bedding, those sorts of things are disposable now. Whereas previously that was a big item, big purchase, and you needed to have that backup, that you knew if there was a problem, someone would fix it for you. And I think the store tried very hard to excel. It originated here, and people in Newcastle are fiercely local about football. Anything that they created is theirs, and it's generally because they were good quality products. And I mean, the footballers, the building societies are good, and the store was a good thing.
It came from that as well too. So what do you think then would be the lasting legacy of the store, even though the store itself's gone? What would you think would be that one thing that is a legacy of what the co-op movement meant in Newcastle?
I think an Australian identity. It's so easy now to be overwhelmed by Americanisms and, as I said, multinational companies. The store was local. It was very Australian. We weren't trying to be anybody else, and it was something that local people could be proud of. Newcastle was an industrial city, and it took a long time for it to work its way. Didn't have a lot of things to be proud of. People would put down the industrial side of things, blue-collar workers. But the places like the store, we had some class. We did some things right. And I think people remember that.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on the recent demolition of the store?
I spent a lot of time, as I mentioned, at the store when it was the Pink Elephant markets afterwards. And we're talking a lot of years. Truly, I don't feel any attachment to it at all. It had served its purpose. If it was in better condition and it wasn't going to cost a fortune, then sure, try and save the facade. But that's a big building. It was a really big building, and it was a mess when I worked there. Yeah. So, it's going to be, I don't blame anyone for pulling it down at all.
So are there any other final comments about the store that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to make? Or?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. Just that it was a really interesting place as a young person, particularly the era. I think the social part of it is a big thing in my mind, and that time of change.
And anything else that you'd like to chat with us about?
I mean, I could ramble on about 100 things if you like. This house, for instance, is an old hospital.
If you wanted to run us through
what you've got there. With something else. You did ask if there was anything that I bought at the store that I still have. My very first wage was $17.22, and I went straight down to the jewellery department, knowing that I had to give $10 to my mother, and I bought this little silver ornament, which I've still got.
That's gorgeous.
Like 2 shillings, 20 cents or something. But I felt such an adult. At that time, people didn't have a lot of jewellery. It was very rare for girls, certainly my age, because we didn't make it here in Australia, and anything had to be brought in. And the manufacturing of India, Bangladesh, China, they just weren't happening. This is not that long after World War II. So to have your own piece of jewellery was a big deal. And in those days, it would have been called Siamese.
Oh, yes, I am.
Not
Yeah,
Thai.
not Thailand, yeah.
It was still called
Yeah.
Siam at that time. Now, photos. Right, I mentioned page 3, girls. So,
Bikinis will be briefer.
yes, especially if the photographer makes you tuck them in.
So talk us through that photo. Where would that have been taken? How long did the shoot take?
That would have been in one of the small parks in Hamilton. In fact, a lot of the photos were taken in Hamilton. I can't remember where that brick wall was, but that was also for the store.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so that was a store promotion as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would have been 16 there, just, and it was the middle of winter. It was very cold.
It's always the way, isn't it? They want you to model bikinis in winter.
Oh dear! And when you read the comments, they're quite sexist. They're they're pretty small. Agreed, the head of the sportswear department. Very funny. Anyway, this was an ad. This is up at King Edward Park. This one's an ad for disposable raincoats. Now that was a really new thing. So plastic raincoats, standing there under the sprinklers, and that was actually my work uniform. So you can see how short the skirt was.
Oh, yeah.
So black and white, but it was.
So is this something that would have been sold at the store?
I'm not sure that it was, but I know that I was on my lunch break when I did that ad.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, these were later when I started doing some more modelling. This was up at the Safari Park up near Raymond Terrace. That way, it's probably about 2 years after I left the store. It's another uniform, looking up the belt. That was just like the page 3 thing again, but a little
Just
bit
to fill in the...
Yeah, I was only 4 or 15 there, so I'd only just started at the store.
Oh, so it says Rhonda Attenborough, 16, enjoys the sunshine that followed the overnight cold.
Right, there I did. And probably taken on the same day, oh no, different day. Just, yeah, pretty much a page 3 thing.
Moves from the old world to the new. Horse riding one day, motorcycle riding the next.
I did. My father was a biker. This is the fashion parade one that I told you about.
The old car one.
Yes, the old car just up at Maitland somewhere. There were other photographs taken that day which were quite funny with cigarette holders and things. So that's me. That's Lindy. Sue's not in that particular one.
Okay.
But there is an interview with each of us giving our comments on the fashions.
Okay,
awesome. Of course, we didn't know that we'd made those comments. They just turned up in the paper. So the whole point of this parade was the minis, middies and maxis were in at the same time. So
it was all about the skirt.
yes, well, I didn't make these comments, by the way. They made them up. So I can read it out for you. Okay, Rhonda Attenborough of Hamilton said, I'm going to wear the maxi after work and at weekends. I did this last season and liked it. There is something attractive about the covered look. My mother and I both like to dressmake, so we will use the soft florals, jerseys, cottons and voiles, no stripes. I do not like the shaved eyebrow look, which is a comment made in pretty much every comment. But the rosy faces will be an improvement on last season's stark ones. And then the one that I told you about for the Gough Whitlam campaign.
Oh, okay, it's time.
Yep.
There you are. Anything else that you've thought of or anything else you want to share with us?
Just that my brother and my sister both worked in the those in the store as well, both of them in the Newcastle store. And my other brother, Greg, who worked in menswear, also did a lot of work in, he's a graphic artist now. He worked in a lot of the ticketing as well. So he was telling me that the code used was the word Pathfinder, which has 10 letters in it and none of them repeated. So if something cost $2.95, the code for that was AEF.
Oh.
So, and the selling price might have been $5.90. So on the ticket, you would have the price and then you would have the cost price.
Okay, so it was a way for the staff to know what the cost price was and what the selling price was without the clients, the customers being aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember it now, but I didn't remember it.
And was that so that prices could be negotiated at all, or what purpose did that serve, do you think?
I don't know. I just think everything was handwritten. Everything that you had to record, had to be somewhere on the product, because it's not like you could look up the
Yes, you write it, yes.
Yeah. So Karen wasn't there for a very long time. She worked down in the food department, and when I say that, I don't mean the groceries, I mean the specialty foods.
Oh, okay.
So they had quite a
Like cheeses and...
sort of a deli, but I don't think there was that much cheese in Australia to choose from at that point. Would have been more canned goods and teas, Portman and Mason, that sort of thing. I think there were, I'm pretty sure there was a chocolate department. I don't know if we made our own.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Rhonda. It's been absolutely amazing chatting with you about your memories and that from the store. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.